Hey friends, and welcome back to the channel. In this video I'm going to show you a really powerful yet simple to set up process for interstitial journaling in Tana. I'm going to talk a little bit about the science behind it, and I'm going to give you a step-by-step walkthrough for how to set it up in your own Tana workspace. I've used this process for interstitial journaling across thousands of hours, and I've taught it to hundreds of people with great success. I've used it during super tough times during grad school, during my PhD, where I had to really focus on things, and it's helped tremendously in really getting into the zone and staying there and making work happen. So let's get into it by answering one question first. What is interstitial journaling and why should you do it? Interstitial journaling is the practice of writing down what you just did when you're switching tasks or projects. The tool you use for it doesn't really matter. You can do it on paper or in an Excel sheet or Roam or Logseq or Obsidian or Tana, as I'm going to show you today. The only thing that does matter is that you write down a sentence or two, what you did, what you completed, and have that as a record of your work. You can, of course, call this a captain's log. That's definitely allowed, and it's going to help you in kind of being a captain of your productivity ship, if we want to stretch that analogy or metaphor a little bit. The thing that interstitial journaling allows you to do is that it gives you a much easier on-ramp into the work when you return to it, right? So I'm sure you have experienced this. You have a task or a project, you get an interruption, or you just have to go to a meeting or whatever, and then you come back and you're scratching your head and wondering, like, okay, what was I doing? Where did I want to go next with this? What's going on, right? And interstitial journaling is great for making that process of going back into that particular flow for that project or task. It's great for making that easier. When you keep a log in that way, right, if you keep an interstitial journaling log, it also gives you long-term visual indicators of progress, right? Like you look at everything you did for one project and you can see just how the work adds up over time, right? And this is very different, at least for me mentally, for framing, than looking at a to-do list, right? The to-do list is prospective, right? Oh, that's all the work I still have to do. Whereas the interstitial journal is, okay, I did this, I did that, and you kind of get the shape as it developed, and not just in terms of these were the tasks that I had to knock out, but you can also write a sentence about the thing that didn't work in doing a certain task, or a challenge that came up and how you framed it and how you got around that challenge, right? So this is what interstitial journaling is perfect for. Again, also across time and across projects for learning, right? If you get stuck on the same problems repeatedly, having a log of your thinking through these projects really helps in identifying these common stumbling points and then finding a solution for them, right? And again, this is kind of the third factor for why interstitial journaling can be extremely powerful in get into productivity and focus, and keep it that way and stay productive and focused on the things you're working on. As you know from the title of this video, I like to take this a little bit further than the basic process of interstitial journaling. I like to do what you might call interstitial journaling plus, and it's kind of a mix between the Pomodoro method and interstitial journaling. Pomodoro method, I'm sure you're familiar with. Cut your work up into 25-minute chunks. then take a break of 5 minutes, and that's how you make sure you're still focused and you continue your work with that focus. What I like to do is enrich this combination of time blocking and interstitial journaling with a few things I've picked up from science and from podcasts about science. And the first one is to work in Ultradian cycles, right? So Ultradian cycles are basically repeating loops of brain activity, right? So you might know that we sleep in kind of like 90-minute intervals, right? So that if you wake up after 6 or 7.5 hours, you're kind of refreshed because you're just leaving one of those 90-minute blocks, whereas if you get woken up after 4 hours, you're like super groggy and you have trouble getting up. That is because you're in the middle of one of these sleep cycles. But they also continue in waking life. So the basic rest activity cycle is kind of the term for this. You can look this up. I'm going to link it down below as well. And the idea is that also during waking time, our focus kind of moves in 90 to 120 minute cycles. And I like to work in these 1.5 to 2 hour blocks. And the process I use for this reflects it. And I'm going to talk in detail about how that exactly looks in just a minute. The second thing I like to do is set implementation intentions at the beginning of bouts of work, as Andrew Huberman calls them. And I also like to make sure that I use kind of psychological tricks to keep me motivated over long stretches of time. So implementation intentions are that I write down precisely what I'm trying to accomplish, and not in the sense of I want to work on my website, but in the sense of I'm going to add a set of 3 new pictures to the landing page and add copy for each picture. Right? That is a very specific goal that I can check off at the end. Did I really do that? And it allows me to track progress. Whereas did I work on the website? Sure. Did I make progress? Who knows, right? So I want to avoid that. And that's why I want to have these very clear instructional kind of implementation intentions. The second thing they do is they allow me to do kind of contingency planning and say, okay, what happens if I get distracted in some way? How am I going to deal with that distraction? And the third thing in that realm is to visualize the negative instead of thinking about a dreamy future. One thing I've taken away from the podcast that Andrew Huberman did with Dr. Balchadis is that in her lab and their work and in the literature, apparently it's useful to visualize the dreamy end goal of where you want to get at the start of a project, but during the work on that project, that loses its motivational impact really quickly. So instead what you want to do is you want to paint the picture of where you want to go at the start, and during the process you want to visualize, okay, what's the alternative if I don't get there, right? So what's going to happen if I don't make that sale, or if I don't finish this paper or whatever, right? So really thinking about, okay, that's going to make me really depressed. I'm going to have to lose face in front of people who I've promised this to, or whatever, right? Like kind of twist the knife a little bit in your own heart to make you engage with the goal and bring up the motivation to work on things. Now, how do I combine all of this? The first one is just the time structuring, right? So what I really go for when I sit down to do focused work is a 2-hour block of uninterrupted time. And in this 2-hour block, what I'm going to do is during the first 10 minutes, I'm going to set the vision. What do I want to get into? Kind of gather the materials, make sure I have everything set up, mise en place, my workspace, and make sure I know exactly where I want to get. Then I do 3 NanoCycles is what I call them. You can call them whatever you want, but 3 NanoCycles of 30 minutes. And between those cycles, I have 5 minutes break where I kind of detach from the work and see, okay, am I still on track? Do I need to reorient? Do I have to scope down what I tried to do in the whole 2 hours or even those 30 minutes, and where I plan the next 30 minutes, right? And say, okay, in the next 30 minutes, I'm going to add 1 picture to the website and write the copy for it, right? And at the end, if you're mentally keeping track of the time, there's still 10 minutes left, right? So we have 90 minutes of actual work time. We have 10 minutes at the front to kind of plan out. Then we have 2 times 5 minutes as a break between the 3 cycles. And then we have 10 minutes at the back. And those 10 minutes I use to review, right? And go through all 3 NanoCycles and see, okay, did I make progress? Is there anything I can take away from this that should inform this particular project the next time I work on it? Or is there a generalizable lesson that I should want to remind myself of, that I should review in the future to make sure I take that lesson into all the work that I do? And so that's the overall structure. The 2-hour block I called a microcycle. And as I said, the 30-minute block I call a nanocycle. Again, you can make up the words for this in your own work. Doesn't really matter. That's my words. All right, with that out of the way, let's actually get into implementing this in Tana. And then once we've done that, I'm going to show you kind of a small example of how you would then fill this out. And at the very end, I might take you through a couple of review sessions that I've done myself that I can share. And then you have kind of the full picture from the motivation to the implementation to the use and then to the review. So let's jump into the demo graph, and I'm going to show you how to set this up for yourself. Okay, so here we are in the demo graph, and we're going to set up the bigger structure first. So we're going to go for the microcycle section, the 2-hour block first, before we get into the individual nanocycle, the 30 minutes during which work actually happens. So let's do this. First, what I'm going to do is add MicroCycle, and we're making this a super tag. So here we are in the definition of the microcycle. So the first field here is a simple field that asks, what am I trying to get done? And I add a little description for myself to remind myself that I want to be as concrete as possible, and I should be able to answer at the end of the whole session whether I accomplished these things by simply answering yes or no questions. To configure this, you don't have to do anything else. It's an anything field. There's no need for drop downs or anything, just that field with its description. The second field is, what are the consequences if I don't? And here I want to think both immediate and long term. Again, this is to kind of activate the motivational part through saying, okay, if you don't do this, bad things are going to happen. You want to prevent bad things. So let's get to it. You don't have to do anything overly dramatic in here. Like, I don't pretend the world is going to end if I don't finish something, but be concrete in what negative things can or possibly will result if you don't finish the things you set out to finish. The third field here in the default content section for the microcycle is, how will I know this is done? And again, this is to prompt me to think through the specification of the done state, if you will, right? Again, I do want to really avoid telling myself to work on whatever. I want to give myself very concrete, reachable goal lines that I can kind of visually focus on, like the research from Dr. Balchadis's lab suggests. So that's what this is for. And then the next field that we're going to add is the what might distract me field, and the what might distract me field and how am I going to prevent it is to kind of prompt for contingency planning. Okay, my dog might need attention, then I will have to get up, or my phone might ring, so I'm going to silence it now so I don't get disrupted, right? Like that's what that field is for. Again, all of these are anything fields, right? So you don't have to fill out any specific configurations. The one thing that we're going to configure a little bit is the next field, which is the review field. So review, and here we're going to ask, what did I get done? Not this week, but in those 2 hours. Did I get bogged down? So any problems with the workflow itself, any big distractions, right? So didn't have the correct file and had to wait for whoever to send it to me, right? That would be one thing. Really hit my head against the wall with this one specific bug, didn't know how to continue, that sort of thing. Then of course you want to ask yourself what went well, right? So that you have suggestions for what you can do again in the future, and record any positive lessons that you learn from doing the work. And then of course other takeaways, there might be negative takeaways and lessons learned for things to avoid, and those can go into this section. Now to configure this field, what we want to do is go to advanced and set the hide field conditions to when empty, and that hides it before we start the microcycle, before we do the work, but we can click it into existence kind of when we're finished and do the review then, but it doesn't take up any space. And then what we want is a section where we do the work. And that's kind of indented or put into the default content section, not as a field, but as a normal node. All right, so now we have a microcycle. Now we have the 2-hour structure. And if I say, okay, it is, let's call it 3 p.m. I'm going to work until 5 p.m. Microcycle. Now what you will see is here I have the things that I want to record, right? So what am I trying to get done? Demo how to set up the NanoCycle tag, and I want to show a demo of how to evaluate cycles over time, right? So that's literally kind of what I'm trying to do here, so that makes sense. What are the consequences if I don't? Yeah, let's be real. This will mean I'm not sticking to my set schedule for video releases, and the algorithm will punish me, right? So we'll see whether I make the release in time. How will I know this is done? I have a recording completed, recording covers evaluation, and recording shows setup of NanoCycle, right? What might distract me? Right now, nothing really, hopefully. Phone might ring, so going to put it on silent mode, right? So this is how I would do this in the first 10 minutes. Now, then what we're going to do is we're going to do the actual work, right? And we would start that at 10 minutes after 3, and we would go until 40, right? And this then would become a NanoCycle, which we're going to set up now. So click on here, click on configure, and the NanoCycle is going to have the following contents. First, what I actually like to record really quickly, because I find over time that really helps in evaluating a cycle and its success, is my kind of physical energy. Like, am I awake? Am I kind of really there physically? And to record whether I want to do the work, whether I'm hyped to do it, or whether I'd rather not. Because that kind of provides context for evaluation later when things don't go as well, is my experience. So the two fields I have for this are energy, and this we're going to configure as a fixed option list. And what I like to do is use emojis, battery, and for me, like, I do this on a 3-point scale. So that's super high energy, kind of normal energy, and really low energy. And this will allow me to say, okay, I have high energy, medium or low energy. And then I record as pre, which kind of works the same way. Fixed options, and here I use fire. So this is the two fields where I'm just kind of recording really quickly my state of mind and my energy level relating to the work that I'm about to do the next 30 minutes. Now, what I then do is have a field for the plan. So what am I going to do? And again, this is basically the same, really concrete, what do I want to get done? And then how will I get started? And how will I get started? I use, because that's the most common source of procrastination that I found and kind of read about in the literature, is not knowing how to start, right? Once you've kind of taken the first step and said, okay, what do I need to do first? Basically open up all the files. Then all the files are open and that's what I need to do. Or, okay, set up a function to do whatever in my code. That's what would go in here. And then I have another field for potential distractions. And I record this again because over the course of an hour or two, there might come up new distractions specific to a certain task that I'm trying to do that I need to avoid, right? So if I'm doing stuff in the YouTube interface, for example, that might be clicking over to the feed or posting a Twitter post and then getting sucked into the replies or whatever, right? And priming myself to say, okay, I have to kind of resist the temptation is what this field is for. Then we'll add another review field. This is not the same as the review for the larger evaluation of the 2-hour period of the microcycle, because I don't have the time, right? This is just within 5 minutes, I have to do the review and the plan for the next one, right? So this is just very bare bones, a couple of notes tops. And then finally, what I have is a field goal completed. We don't need a comment actually, but let's configure the field to be hidden when empty, and we're going to turn it into a fixed options list again. Yes. Let's take half and Grim for no, right? So that lets me select, okay, yeah, I actually didn't finish that cycle. One thing I really like to do is configure the potential distractions field to be actually auto collect. So auto collect we're going to set to yes, and that lets me kind of say the repeating things, I don't have to write them down all the time, right? So expecting a phone call or getting a post delivery or whatever, I like to have that as single values that I can then actually see how often I've marked that as a potential distraction. All right, and this is the template. So if we expand this now, we have energy. Right now I'm feeling okay. Esprit, this is super fun. What am I going to do? Set up the NanoCycle tag. How will I get started? Create the tag. And this is really like create the tag. Yeah, that's literally how I get started, right? This is the level of fanciness that you're going for here. Potential distractions, none. That's also really cool to see if it is auto collect as a field that you know, okay, this is actually not to see how often you don't expect to be distracted. I find that valuable. Review, right, that we wanted to configure to be hide when empty as well, because we don't need it right now. Cool. Did we get this done? Yes, we do. So let's do the review. Nothing noteworthy to report. No distractions. What's to improve? Well, this went as expected and really well, I think. So did I complete my goal? Yes, I did. Set up the NanoCycle tag. Right. So we're going to pretend it's now 1540. And what's the... If I had any notes, right here is where I could put notes on what I was trying to do and like keep myself thinking or actually writing if I wanted to do, and then use that or reuse that in different contexts. Because again, in Tana, everything is a node, so it doesn't really matter where you put that work. As long as you then tag it, you will always find it, even if it's nested like 4 levels deep here. 1, 2, 3, 4. And you have this in this structure of work tracking, doing micro and nano cycles. All right, so this cycle is complete, and what we're going to do next is NanoCycle and basically have the same template again, right? What's my energy level? All right, still feeling good, still fun. What am I going to do? One thing you could do is make the title of the node, right? The timestamps work through auto initialization formulas. I don't want that actually, because I might set up all 3 cycles before I do them, right? And I really go for the times where that the clock gives me, right? So if I start at 3, I want to start the NanoCycle at 10 past, but I will set it up before, right? And I don't want to then mess with it, right? So I find it more convenient to just manually take this and write the timestamps in there. But you do you, right? That is how you can do this. All right, and that's the setup, right? To really quickly review, we have the MicroCycle that runs for 2 hours. It's split up in a 10-minute section at the very beginning where you fill out this here, and then you do 3 NanoCycles where you kind of ask yourself a couple of beginning questions and then a couple of questions at the end, and then you take your notes. Now, again, this is Interstitial Journaling Plus, right? The Interstitial Journaling Pomodoro mix, whatever, ultra working work cycles work like this. Like, there's a million ways to call it this. You don't have to do this, right? So if this seems kind of like, then don't, right? Like in Tana, you can also do interstitial journaling, just like insert current time, spent the last 10 minutes setting up NanoCycle tag. Done, right? That's also interstitial journaling. But this video was about the whole process. And so I wanted to show you a little bit more because this is a 3-minute video. It's a YouTube short even, but the longer way that kind of shows off Tana a little bit more is the one and the process that I actually use, right? Like, this is how I work when I really want to do focused work. All right, so finally, let's look into how you can then use this information if you're working in Tana and doing your interstitial journaling using a process like this and using tags like this. What I can now do is I can say, okay, I want to create a search node and I want to find all NanoCycles where, for example, the field goal completed is no, right? So I run this and I have, okay, 2 cycles. This is just a demo, but I can assure you my real one is longer. And now I look at this as a table. Okay, both are no. Interestingly, okay, one is where I had super low energy and didn't want to do the work. And okay, anything noteworthy, lunch was kind of too heavy, right? And I basically fell asleep at the desk. And then another thing, like, looks like that should not be a cycle where I completely fail to accomplish the goal that I'm setting. But I see, oh, okay, there seems to have been a distraction. Superman landed in my yard. Okay, that would very much distract me, right? So this is then how you can get a really quick overview, okay, of where might the problems lie. Of course, as the list goes longer, you will gather much more information about yourself and your work and be able to spot patterns really easily. And with that, it's a wrap. In this video, we covered a ton of ground. I talked with you about the use and kind of a little bit about the science behind doing interstitial journaling plus in your day-to-day work to go into deep focus. We walked through how to set this up in your own Tana workspace, and we looked at what we can do with the data exhaust that kind of comes out of doing this in the same tool as you're doing your work in, right? Because it lets you really closely map your energy state and your thinking and your process to the output and see, okay, what's working, what isn't working, compared to doing it in any other way. I hope this process is going to be as useful to you as it's been for me. Do let me know in the comments if you like this video and want to see more videos like it. Hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. Click the little bell icon and I'll talk to you in the next video. Thanks for watching and bye-bye.